What is going on, Trash Talkers? We're back with another episode for you. In today's video, we're going to talk about allegations former NFL players have made against the NFL, accusing them of race norming. All that and much more coming your way right now! Hey Trash Talkers, it's Mike here. Over 93% of you who view our show each and every day are not subscribed to the channel. If you could hit that red subscribe button, it would help us out tremendously, and it is completely free for you guys. If you want to stay up to date with our daily content, then click that bell icon and you will be notified every time we go live. Nick and I both really appreciate you subscribing to the channel, and we can't wait to keep making more daily content for you. All right, Nick. Today's video is going to be a little different than normal. I wanted to discuss something that I was hoping to have heard a lot more from the media about, something that came to light about, I don't know, roughly 2 weeks prior to us filming this video today. And that would be that former NFL players have accused the NFL of race norming. Now, for those of you in the audience who do not know what race norming is, which basically means that the NFL assumes that black players started out with a lower cognitive function than other players of other races, meaning that when they tested for concussions, they assumed that their IQ levels were lower than the races of other players, which is obviously disgustingly wrong. And I think we have to shed light onto it. We have to discuss this because this is something that should never have happened. I just don't even understand how you get to a point where you think that's an okay thing for a billion-dollar organization to go through, but also for the simple fact that they didn't even come out and say, oh, this is something that we do. They were caught by their players doing it. And we're going to get into all of this. But, Nick, I just want you to give your immediate reaction to all of this that's happening and kind of tell us what your thoughts are on this situation.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely disgusting how the NFL has had this in place since the 90s and they have never changed the rules. They have never adopted a different way of testing players, how they are dealing with symptoms of concussions and how they have dealt with issues off the field once they have retired. You can't just assume that because of a person's skin color that they are at one level of lower cognitive function than another. When you look at players like Richard Sherman or Russell Wilson or all these guys who have either come from Ivy League schools or are some of the most profound leaders we find in the NFL, who are excellent speakers and able to teach us all different things because they are just at such a high level of cognitive function. You can't say, well, because they are black players, they belong in a lower echelon. That is 100% wrong. You have to take a different approach to that, and the NFL is finally being called upon it, and they're finally being forced to take some action to correct these issues that have been longstanding in the NFL.
It's not only wrong, it's absolutely deplorable and despicable. I mean, I don't understand why we're not getting more outrage from this, in all honesty. I mean, what you brought up good points with Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson. I would just say that in general, you don't judge another person based on exterior features, on how they're going to think, how they're going to speak, how they're going to act. You don't do that. I don't do that. I've never done that in my entire life. And listen, I understand that that's kind of where we are as a country right now. But we're at a point where we have to understand that not only does something like this hurt the NFL players, but it hurts an entire community. It hurts an entire culture of people. And I mean, it's not enough to be outraged as we are right now. I'm just so disgusted and I'm really angry with the ideas that people like Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, Shannon Sharp, and all these guys who have the platforms that they do on daily talk shows, They gave one segment on it and they never talked about it again. But they'll be the first guys to run up on stage and talk about how Colin Kaepernick should have a job and all. You gotta play the same thing. I understand that that ESPN and FS1 are sponsors and they work with the NFL. That should have no bearing on what they do for their job. And we function here independently on YouTube. You and I speaking about sports in a manner in which we believe is necessary, and I believe it is necessary to shed light on the absolute abysmal acts that the NFL has been called out on and what the Supreme Court has gone through so far. So we have an article that came out through the Associated Press that was sent out through ESPN, NPR, so on and so forth. We're going to go layer by layer, break it down for you guys, and honestly, we want to hear in the comments down below what you guys think about this, what your thoughts are, and how we should continue to move forward. But I want to start off with reading the article, and don't forget that article will be in the description below if you want to read it for yourself. All right, so starting off with the first paragraph, this was back on June 2nd of this year, 2021. The NFL on Wednesday pledged to halt the use of quote unquote race norming, which assumed black players started out with a lower cognitive function in the $1 billion settlement of brain injury claims and to review past scores for any potential race bias. So, speaking about everything that's gone on, this is a basic encapsulation of what this story is going to be about. There was a $1 billion settlement that took place because of these acts. And that is the NFL's way of reparations for what they've done, because what they understand is that, yeah, this probably shouldn't have happened, and now we're being called out on it because somebody else found it before we could rectify it ourselves. And they were called out on it by former players. And Nick, I just want to get your thoughts on this. What do you think about this so far?
Again, this is something that I can't believe has been around for such a long time. And it's about time that players have gotten smart to what the NFL has been up to, because this isn't the one and only thing the NFL has been doing dirty behind everybody's back. They've been doing so many other things wrong and negligible. It's about time that they're getting called on it. And it's about time that the NFL takes some actions to fix their own internal problems. This is one of many, but I hope this starts a trend of fixing everything that's wrong, not only in the NFL, but in sports.
Not just in sports, but I would say in society as well. This needs to be a wake up call for our country, for the world, to say to just figure it out. I mean, I can say almost for certain that our generation of people are much more inclusive, much more accepting, and we are just in a situation where we're trying to, which sounds terrible, wait out the older generations. I mean, they are the ones that have caused these issues. You talk about this rule being implemented back in the 90s. That's when we were born, and these are the rules that they continue to follow with. I don't accept that, and I believe that all of these companies, all of these organizations need to start changing. So as we continue on with this article, it says the practice had made it harder for black players to show a deficit and qualify for an award. The standards were designed in medicine in the 1990s in hopes of offering more appropriate treatment to dementia patients, but critics faulted the way they were used to assess legal damages in the NFL case. So, this means that this was something that they used in dementia cases, which is still again wrong. This was used in the medical field. Not now we're breaking the barrier of sports. We're simply talking about just society and the medical society thinking that it's okay to believe that somebody has a lower IQ and lower intellect because of their race, which is just absolutely disgusting. And then they discuss how the NFL adopted this in the 90s in hoping to, utilize it, but it was utilized the wrong way because they used it in the legal courtroom, talking about when players wanted settlement money because they suffered brain injuries that they didn't test properly because they were said to have had a lower cognitive function at the beginning. So if they had that much lower cognitive function at the end, then that was to be expected, and they aren't going to get a payouts, which is how this all came to light.
It's incredible to think that you can take one white NFL player and say, oh, they're white, they're smarter. But if you look at their background, oh, wait, they're uneducated. They've never been, they've never had any academic accolades that they've accomplished. And they've always been in this state of they're not as smart as everybody else. But because they are showing up on tests after their NFL career that they are below what we assume is what their IQ should be, they deserve a settlement. And then we look at a black player. Take Richard Sherman, for example. Highly educated, went to an Ivy League school. Now, at the end of his career, he may have brain damage, but he's still testing above where they say black players should be testing. So he doesn't get a settlement. He doesn't get any money from the NFL for the injuries that he suffered throughout his career. That is just absolutely ridiculous. That is so deplorable. And how can you stand behind a league that is going to accept these rules and take them for what they are? Take what one person has to say and use that as a basis of determining how players have regressed throughout their career and determine how much money they should be given for the sacrifices they have made to make you money.
Yeah, it's absolutely disgusting, and obviously, it's being changed right now. But I mean, there's more to this story. So as we continue, it says Wednesday's announcement comes after a pair of black players filed a civil rights lawsuit over the practice. Medical experts raised concerns, and a group of NFL families last month dropped 50,000 petitions at the federal courthouse in Philadelphia, where the lawsuit had been thrown out by the judge overseeing the settlement. So this means that the U.S. court that was overseeing this ended up throwing out the case because it did not meet the criteria for a civil rights lawsuit. This practice did not meet the criteria for what they think should be part of a civil rights lawsuit. And I believe that when you take a look at everything that has transpired, I mean, just thinking about it rationally, this should absolutely be a civil rights lawsuit. And I believe that the NFL players that have suffered the consequences of such an unfair system and such a racial bias need to be rewarded by the court system to at least hear their case and at least hear what their thoughts are on this situation. And
To me, it's unbelievable to think that a court system, something that is supposed to hold up our rights of freedom, our rights of equality, is absolutely going against what they should be doing. They need to look at this and say, this is not right. The NFL is treating people differently based on their skin color. They need to change that. They're looking solely on what the facts have said in the past, and they're not looking at what the facts say in the present. They're not looking at how things are looked at now. They've got to change this old mindset of we're going to use the facts only and we're not going to look into it any further. We're just going to take it for what it is. You got to take everything with a grain of salt. You got to look into it for yourself to get the real answers, because everything on surface level is going to look the way it should until you do that deep digging. And that's why in this case, we're lucky to have these NFL players who have done the deep research to actually go back and figure out there is something significantly wrong here and it needs to have more light shed upon it. And with that said, we got 50,000 signatures signed here. And that's why the judges in this case have taken a second look. And the NFL is finally being called out on it. They're finally being forced to make some reparations for these players that they have treated so unequally.
yeah, absolutely. And this article goes on to say that senior U.S. District Judge Anita B. Brody later took the unusual step of asking for a report on the issue. This was after the lawsuit had already been thrown out. Black retirees hope it will include a breakdown of the nearly $800 million in payouts so far by race. They fear, unfortunately, that the data will never come to light, meaning that they're hoping that the NFL provides them some context as to, why they denied people based on, you know, IQ function or whatever the case is. I believe that they're going to go through each and every single case and determine whether it needs to be revisited or not. And absolutely should be. All these players, assuming that they're still alive, should definitely be awarded something if they meet the new criteria for the concussion settlement. So, obviously, as some of these guys say, words are cheap. Let's see what they do. There's a lot of things that have gone on here. According to the NFL spokesperson, the replacement norms will be applied prospectively and retrospectively for those players who otherwise would have qualified for an award, but for the application for the race based norms, meaning that they are going to take a look back at themselves and start taking a look and see, where did the previous system fall apart and where should they revisit it. I don't believe that we should trust the NFL to look inward and say, you know what, we're going to revisit this on a case by case basis and then determine who deserves money. I think there needs to be a third party. I think there needs to be some sort of arbitrator, some sort of judge that comes in here and takes a look at what is going on with the NFL and what with these former players, because they have already shown that their incompetence to understand just the levity of the situation, it's deafening how loud it is. And I believe at this point they cannot be trusted, and we cannot take their word for it as they are going through case by case. I don't even think they're going to do it. I think it's all for show. I think it's all to get everybody off their back, and then they're just going to let it dissipate into thin air. The NFL continues to need to be held accountable by outside third parties, and at this point there's a lot that needs to happen. But as we continue on down this article, it says the binary race norms, when they are used in the testing, assumes that black patients start with worse cognitive function than whites and other non-blacks. That makes it harder for them to show a deficit and qualify for an award. More than 2,000 NFL retirees have filed dementia claims, but fewer than 600 have received awards. According to the most recent report, more than half of all NFL retirees are black, according to lawyers involved in the litigation. The awards so far have averaged $516,000 for the 379 players with early stage dementia and $715,000 for the 207 players with moderate dementia. So we are talking about massive payouts that are going to help these players that played well before the contracts that we see nowadays. We're talking about when they played for regular everyday salaries, essentially, maybe a little more than that. And these guys put their heads, their brains on the line, not even knowing it, playing a game, playing a sport for their profession. And obviously safety codes were not up to snuff, and they are suffering the consequences in their older age, and they are relying on the NFL to do right by them. And as we have discussed, I just do not believe that the NFL has it within their willpower to get this right and to do right by the former players. I believe that, when we take a look at these numbers, we're talking about more than 2,000 NFL retirees have filed dementia claim. That's just the players that have the cognitive function that is still available to them to be able to file these lawsuits, or to understand that they may qualify. We're not even talking about the ones that don't. On top of that, we're talking about only 600 have been paid out of those 2,000. I can only imagine what that number would be if the process for figuring out who deserved a proper award was actually fair and honest.
It's incredible to me that we actually refer to this as an award, as if they've earned this. It's unbelievable to think that the NFL thinks they are doing something right for the players. They are doing what they have to do. This is something that NFL players should be given for their sacrifice. That's exactly what they do out there on an NFL field. They are putting their bodies, their lives on the line each and every game, each and every practice. This is something the NFL owes the NFL players for everything they have given up through their careers. And if they are showing those signs of dementia, those signs of CTE, they more than deserve to get everything they need for medical coverage to make sure that the rest of their lives are taken care of, and their families, because it's not just the football players going through it, it's their families as well. We got to make sure that we're protecting our own, we're taking care of our own, and it starts with these payouts. We need to make sure that the NFL is held responsible and accountable, and they are held to the nth degree of responsibility.
Before we close this video out, and before we move on from this subject altogether, I just wanted to take a minute and really put things into perspective for you. So we're talking about players that sacrifice themselves, and some of you may think that these players aren't owed that, and that is your right. You are entitled to that form of thinking. But let me just shed some light on some numbers for you. The highest paid player in the NFL is currently Patrick Mahomes, who signed a record $500 million contract. He makes an average of $45 million a year. He puts his body, his mind, everything on the line all year long, week in and week out to compete for a Super Bowl. He goes through absolute physical strain and everything that a professional athlete puts their body through. Roger Goodell, who heads the league, makes $40 million a year. We are talking about the commissioner of a sport who doesn't have to go to the gym, that doesn't have to train, doesn't have to go to practice, doesn't have to play week in and week out, is not judged based on the skill that they provide on the field, but rather is the face of the NFL shield. We're paying that man $40 million when we're not even paying out former players who are suffering from early stages and moderate dementia. I mean, what are we talking about here? I believe that we need an uprising of NFL fans to not only get rid of Roger Goodell, but we need an overhaul of the NFL and the current regime that resides there. Because far too often have we had to come into question what Roger Goodell has done for former players, for current players, for the fans, for everybody involved that makes that sport tick. We support our teams as fans because that is what we love to do. But we have to take a step back and say, is the sport of football really something that we should be supporting based on the things that they are doing behind the scenes? And that's what we're here to shed light on. So I want to hear from you guys. I know Nick does too. Why don't you let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this story, what you think that the NFL should do moving forward, uh, and tell us honestly, like what your thoughts are. If you believe that you know what the NFL should do as far as reparations are concerned, or what Roger Goodell should be doing. I mean, and also tell us why you think that more media outlets like ESPN, FS1, so on and so forth, are not covering this story. I want to hear it from you guys because I have my own theories, but I sure as hell want to hear from you guys because I'm really interested.
And guys, this is not something that is being talked about in mainstream media, as we have said. So we need you guys to get this story out there. We need you to hit the like button. That is the only way that this is going to be spread to more and more people. And that all of us, as NFL fans, as people who love to see our favorite athletes week in and week out on the greatest stage of them all, we want to make sure that they are taken care of. And we want to make sure that everybody understands what they are going through off the field as well. We need to have their voices heard through this. Please like this video. Let everybody else know what is up, what is going on, and that action needs to be taken against the NFL.
Yeah, like the video, share it, comment on it. I mean, do everything you can because we need to push this message out to as many people as possible. We need to get people understanding that the way that this country, that this sport, that some people used to operate, it's no longer acceptable. Should never been accepted in the first place. But at this point, we need to make change, and we can only do that by spreading the word. We need you guys to help us do that. So let's get it popping. Let's do it, and let's do it for a good cause. All right. Well, that's going to be it for now. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell. We go live every single day. That'll be all. Peace and love.